Hello everybody, this is Chris with Click Team for our Reactor stream today on December 15th. Today is going to be a shorter stream than usual. We're going to go over two things. We're going to talk a little bit more about procedural generation. No one really posted what they wanted on this week's What Do You Want post. So I figured maybe you guys want some more procedural generation. I polished up the forest one we were doing, and I'd love to hear some suggestions of what to do next. And then after, we're going to play a little bit of Anahita. And Anahita is a new game. Click Team really prides itself of being a tool that anybody can use, including folks from all over the world. Anahita actually comes out of Iran, which is pretty cool. He has been a long-time Fusion user. Maybe you've seen his other game, Datswire, which is on the forums. So cool stuff. There's our Facebook page. I don't know why I had it up because I wanted to see Perry's message. But if you haven't signed up for Facebook, please visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/clickteam, as well as twitter.com/clickteam. We'd love to have you sign up. Another note before we begin, Fusion Wars, our next Click Jam, starts in just 3 days. If you haven't signed up for it and you want to compete, we're going to have some prizes, which we'll announce the day of. Please come down and join the jam on Itch. It'll be lots of fun. In fact, next week's going to be a fairly decent week for Click Team. We've got a lot lined up, so stay tuned to clickteam.com. No, we're not releasing Fusion 3 next week, so don't ask. But we've got a lot of other cool things lined up, so we hope you'll like it. So anyways, let's get started. So we left off last week on our procedural generation with... Let's see if I can pull it up so we can see where we left off. I may have saved over it, and if I did, then that's it. Yeah, okay, so here's the old one. And we kind of left with this, and then we added the trees moving in the wind. So I took that, and I worked a little bit longer on it. And what we've got now, I think you'll like, we've got this. Huge difference. And quite honestly, it wasn't that much more work. I borrowed the leaves algorithm from a posting on ClickStore by one of our longtime users who does many incredible particle effects. But the rest I did. In fact, if you watch the clouds, you even get the clouds stay in the same perspective as you walk through the different frames, which is kind of cool. And again, it's all procedurally generated, so if I use this seed value, it's going to be the same every time. I'm still kind of working on the wind. If you notice when you first walk into a screen, the branches all seem to be in sync. Still working on that, but I think it's looking pretty passable. So how did we do all this? Basically, all of that are these objects here. That's all it's doing. I'm using these objects, scaling them, pasting them, repeating them in an organized manner. In my experience, that's really all procedural generation is. So again, let's take a look at the code so we can get you synced up. There's the falling leaves code that I borrowed. And that's the cool thing about ClickStore. I was able to say, hey, you know what, I want to add falling leaves real quick. Is there anything on ClickStore? Boom, it was there. I downloaded it, and I was able to apply it to my project real quick. Let's actually take this look here. Let's look at the event list view. So the meat of the procedural generation happens on line 3, which executes it. And then these lines here, the generate world group. So what we do is we start by taking the random seed value, which we have as a global, right here. And I was fancying 2558 earlier today. And then we set the randomizer object to that seed value. So in this case, because I was displaying the seed value, I made it text and then I converted it to a value. I could have easily have just said retrieve global value random seed, and it would have done the same thing. I think in a previous build I was manipulating the seed value here, but I simplified that later. So then we start creating these different events. Now you saw tree, but we've added create bush, create grass, create rock bottom, and then set wind state, which really isn't procedural generation, but that's my attempt to randomize the branches at start. And then down here we have two two groups for initiating the clouds. So at the beginning of the app, there is no cloud string, so it runs create clouds, which again is more procedural generation of clouds. So let's get down to the world generation. So we're going to skip recreate clouds for now, and I believe the first one we call is create bush. So I've created this bush object, which will go here, and it's basically just this. It's just some blocky, different looking sprites in one animation slot. Not that complex. Flat colors, very square-like. You could make it as complex or as detailed as you want. And it serves as a single active object. And that object is created at start. So in this case, the object does exist at the beginning. So what we're doing is when we run that routine, which I believe we run it, in this case, 50 times, pulling out from the random randomizer, we pull a random number for the X position of the screen, its X position, and we reposition it from the frame width. So you could, in fact, instead of saying 1136, I could easily say frame width if I wanted. Same thing. And then we force that animation frame, those 6 animation frames, to a random number to 6, which, again, random number return, when you say 6, it's going to return 0 to 5. So like random number 8 would be 0 to 7, because 0 counts as one of the integers. So random 6 integers starting at 0. Then I'm manipulating the vertical position, the Y position. I have a baseline of 600, which puts it right about here. And then to layer it, I push in a little bit. Right here, we push in a random 0 or 7 additional pixels down. And then here's the magic, we paste it into the background. And the reason why I do that with any static object is otherwise you're going to get a high object count. Because we wanted to animate the trees and make them move in the wind, we already had a fairly high object count with 362. So if I was to turn off the leaves and the clouds, it's around 334 on this run. And you can see it's pretty consistent because we're using the exact same algorithm each frame, just repositioning them. So 332 to 400, that's a lot of objects to run. I mean, it's not. Fusion can run thousands of them without a bat. But if I wanted to do a mobile platform with it like iOS or Android, especially Android, the devices are so different that you get a different result on each. So you want to kind of always think of the lowest common denominator when designing. What is the least powered machine I'll be running this on? And that should be your target for optimization. So that's why we paste it in the background. So even though we have all these bushes, and if you look at them, we got this dark green one overlapping a light green one. And I come back to that screen, it's right back there. They're just background objects. And I'm pasting them in a specific layer, that layer being the layer the object occupies, which is the third layer. So that's in front of the trees. Whereas the clouds I'm creating, they're being created behind the trees. So you can layer the objects. And yes, if you're not familiar with it, a background object, even though on the same layer, it's always in the background and actives appear in front of it. If you create a backdrop object on a layer higher, then it does overlap any actives you have, which is a great way to do some things. So I could, if I wanted to, I could move the bush to the 4th layer, and it will suddenly be in front of the player. As you can see, now the player is behind the bushes, which is kind of cool. Another thing we could do, if we wanted to, we could go to that bush command, and I could say under, I believe it's layer, I could move to layer, and I could say layer 3 plus, and pull another random number, 2. So it'll start at layer 3, and then depending on the randomizer will output 0 or 1, so we could pop it in between different layers. Let's make sure that that looks good. And now we run it. And so now some of them are in front and some of them are behind, giving it even more of a kind of a 3D quality, which is kind of cool. And again, because we're using that randomizer object with a seed value, it's always going to be the same value every time. Notice though that 2558 is now producing something different than what 2558 looked like originally, which was let's take a look. I have it here somewhere. New folder. So that's what 2558 originally looked like, and the reason why it's different now is because I'm using an additional pulling of a random number from the random pool. So the sequence is now out of order, so now things are positioned differently. So maybe we have to find one that looks better. Okay, I like 1421 is a good one. So I go ahead and I put that in my seed value slot, run it, and now I got exactly what I want. So let's see if you have any questions so far. More comments about Fusion 3, okay. And let's say hello to the folks in YouTube. And thanks for watching. So we repeat that process that I just mentioned with the brush object. We do it with the grass, which is this element down here. And again, the grass object is really no different than the bush object. It's just a series of randomly shaped grass tiles that get randomly pasted in. And because it's randomly picking them, it creates a kind of a textured effect that you can see. Some are overlapping, some are underlapping. But the cool thing is you get the same result each time. So you're able to create an entire world, and you really don't need art. Now, of course, it's very blocky and simple, but you could, again, make it as complex as you want. So we do that with the grass, the bush, as well as the rock bottom, which is this kind of detail strip down here. Now in the background, I added these trees that are fading, and whereas the tree trunks, the foreground tree trunks, are made up of this object here, which are scaled at real time, you can't paste a scaled or angled object into the background. So if I was to rotate a line 45 degrees using angle and then paste it in, it's going to revert back to its initial state when pasting. So in the case of the tree trunks, when I wanted to add tree trunks in the background, I had to create a separate tree trunk object, which for effect I added the alpha channel. And I have 3 variations of the tree trunks, and then each variation has 2 sizes. So again, repeating that same process that we talked about earlier. But here, I create that tree trunk. And because I wanted to avoid the tree trunks overlapping too much randomly, instead of just going with the frame width, I am randomizing the maximum width of the tree trunk and multiplying it by 50. I'm sorry, the maximum width was 50 and I'm multiplying it by 22, which is the closest you get to fitting them in 1136, which puts them kind of in a grid situation, which is very similar to what we did here, creating that grid of objects. So, which helps prevent overlap for the most part. Now I know sometimes we get overlap on this example. So far so good, but that's another way to control what you're creating randomly. And so we did the same thing with the trees, and that's why when we look at the trees, wrong example, when we look at the trees, you know, they don't overlap very much in the background, which is exactly what I was looking for. There may be some overlap there. Now, when I was putting this together, you know, well, how did you do it, Chris? How did you know exactly how you wanted it? Honestly, it was a lot of experimentation. You kind of get an idea of how long you want to stretch it, how wide you want to stretch it, what the angles are going to be, whatever randomization you want to put in there, and then you got to experiment a lot. And I did do a little bit of experimentation earlier today to get the right effect. And then we get to the create branches part, which you saw last week. So this particular line is creating a tree trunk, and then I'm storing some of the information I'm using into these pass values in the global object because I'll need to pull them later because they need to be, for the branches, the association needs to be there. When I create this tree trunk, I need to know where to associate my branches to it. Otherwise, they could go anywhere. So we store that data. We start with pass value 1. In this case, ends up being the X position randomly, frame width. And again, pulling from the randomizer object from its pool. Then we set the Y and X scale. And then you'll notice down here, after we force the animation and plant the tree into the ground with the Y position, we set value 2 to the top position of the sprite stretched. So that gives us, that returns whatever this value is here. And then you'll notice when I was testing it, I subtracted 20 more. And the reason I did that is because when it wasn't 20, let's take the 20 out, and I run it, I noticed that in some cases I could see the top of the tree. It doesn't look like it's happened. Let's see if we can find an instance of it happening. Well, we're not getting an instance of it happening. And that's probably because I went from the smaller trees to the large ones. But when it were smaller, I could see the top of the trees, the tree trunk, and it didn't look right. So what I did is I said, well, I'm pulling that value here. Why don't I subtract another 20 to push it up even further? And then pass value 3 is the actual X position of the tree trunk, which is very similar to pass 1. I could probably use this value in replace. In fact, if you look down here, in fact, I did that. So we could probably get rid of that, and it still runs the same. Because that's basically pass 1 and pass 3 were the exact same value. I set the X position of the tree trunk to pass 1, and then I'm pulling the X position of the tree trunk later down in the order of execution. So we don't need that. We'll get rid of that. That means pass value 3 as a variable is available to use later in this loop. So then, once we've set our pass values and laid the trunk down, we then execute the create branches fast loop. And this is a nested loop, which means I've called the create tree loop, which is up here. We called it 10 times. That means I'm going to make 10 tree trunks. But as it runs, I'm pausing the rest of the app, and it runs this event the first time, it gets down here to create branches 8 times. So it pauses the create tree subroutine and executes the nested subroutine create branches underneath it. So we go down 2 loops. It's kind of like Inception, if you will. You go down another layer. So after this is executed 8 times, it then goes back and executes the second iteration of create tree, and then executes create branch 8 times. And it'll go through that until create tree has executed 10 times, and for each time it's executed, branches were created 8 times. If that makes sense. For those of you that are not very familiar with fast loops, I hope my convoluted description of it works out for you. So the very first thing I do when I create branches is I set pass value 4 and 5 to a shared number, because I'm going to, again, refer to these numbers throughout the generation of the branches. So the first one is giving us a value of 0 to 4, and then the second one is giving us a value of 0 to 7. So the very first thing we do is we position the horizontal position of the branch to pass value 1, which we remember up here is the base, the X position of the tree trunk. And that's why we pass it, so it becomes associated. Then we do some Y position. So we start with the top, if you remember pass value 2, which is right here, is the top minus 20 of the tree trunk. So we start by positioning the tree trunk, the branch at the very top of the tree trunk. Then we add loop index. So if it's loop index 0, it returns a 0. If it's loop index 1, it'll return 30. And then we add that to loop index again times 10. And then for giggles, we added a little bit of randomization 0 to 9 there to kind of stagnate it and give it that more natural look. Especially in nature, randomization is a key function, especially with plant life, to make the plants look real, at least in 2D. I'm assuming it's the same in 3D. Then we have our X scale, which is the thickness of the branch. And the Y scale, the Y scale is the thickness of the branch. The X scale is the length of the branch. And as you can see, because we went with pine trees, the X scale increases as we go down the tree. And that's how we can tell it's a pine tree. You can see, I can see the top of the branch there, so there's an issue with my algorithm. So the reason why the X scale, again, it's 4. We start with 4, and then we multiply it by 4 times the loop index. So that helps increase the length each iteration of the loop. And then for giggles, we add that random range to give it more randomization. And I set the quality to 0. It's a flat color, so we don't really need to preserve any form of scaling, so you can use quality 0 in your scaling when using flat colors. If you use sprites that are highly detailed, you may want to experiment with what quality you want to use. Then we set the angle. Now the angle starts at 359, which is pretty much the same as 0, which is, of course, to the right, or, positive up in the x. So it starts like this. And then we subtract, again, increasing that number with loop index, times 3, plus pass value 4, which we have right here, which is random 0 to 4. So this number gets larger and larger as we go, and it's being subtracted from the angle. So that's how the very top branches are kind of looking like this, but then as we go down, they begin to angle down. And that gives us this effect here, where you can see this is pretty much at a 0 or 360 degree direction, 359, 0, and then each one begins to angle downwards. And then we set the base angle to angle, which is a value that we'll need later. And then we force the animation to pass value 5, which is 0 to 7, and that is going to be, if we grab our branches object, that's these different colors and shape sizes of each branch. Now the reason why we match it to pass value 5 is, remember, we're creating 2 sets of branches, some moving to the left, some moving to the right, as part of it. And we could randomize the color, but by syncing the color, both sides, as you can see here, have the same color, and that looked better. So, we could, just for giggles, try it. So let's say I make this just random 5. I'm sorry, random 8. And we'll copy that, and we'll change it through. And then we run it, and we get, it didn't look as good. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't look as good. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. But it doesn't seem to mesh well. So that's part of that experimentation I was referring to, where sometimes you just have to get out there and experiment to see what looks best when building your creation algorithms. So we'll put it back, and then suddenly we got our trees, in my opinion, looking a little better. Once you get out of the source, you can manipulate it and change around all you want and see what works for you. So then that creates all the branches. And then that gives us, so far, this world. Now, once we get down to, we'll close the world generation. So in, let's see, what we're talking, just around 20 events, well, less than 20 events with the comments, we've created this entire world to our liking. So that's pretty cool. And after that, we then wanted to animate it. So if you remember up here when we start the world, I have that set win state. And what I was attempting to do is pick one and set one or the other. So basically what's happening is when I first did it and I was setting the win state in a fast loop, I tried setting it to an each loop. And I got the exact same result for each one. So then what I did is I said, okay, well, let me try to differentiate, and that's what this win switch is. So the very first thing that happens on the loop is I'm picking a random value between 0 and 1 for win switch. If it equals win switch in the fast loop 0, then it picks 1 and sets these settings. If it's win switch 1 on the loop, it picks one of the objects and sets these settings, which are antithesis in the process of scaling, because remember our scaling works like this. So once these are set, it then runs right into the loop and picks up exactly where in our loop the object would be manipulated. So it could end up being manipulating here or manipulating here or what have you. And then this is this is what governs the loop for the scaling back and forth. And then finally, to create the endless world, if you will, we have our player leave on the right or the left. And if it does, I'm adding a random seed value, and that should, for good form, be up there. First thing I do is I start a for each loop on the clouds, named store clouds. I add one to random seed value, and that's how we increment up or increment down into the level. So when I start on seed value 1421 and I go out to the left, it's now 1420. But when I go back, it's 1421, and it generates the exact same world. So that's the first thing we do, is we add or subtract the seed value. And then after we've done the store clouds, which I'll show you in a second, and after we've added the seed value, I store a pass command, which will then be used in a second, that says from left or from right. And the reason why we have that, because after I restart the current frame, up here, start a frame, I compare it, is it from right or from left? And if it does, it determines where our character appears. The character starts in the middle of the screen when we start the game, but now that I'm going to the left, it'll say start left, and it generates me over here. But if I go through the right, it then starts me over here. And that's how we make that effect that looks like you're walking through. But really, this is all just one frame, and just the 8 objects creating the world, plus the guy. And then the other trick I did is the clouds. If you notice in the clouds, I got 2 clouds layered there. And when I walk through, they're in the exact same position, because really your perspective of the clouds wouldn't change as you're walking through the woods. So I had to find a way to make them stay exactly the same as you walk through the different levels. And we do that with the 2 events you see up here. If there is no cloud string, then we're going to randomly create those clouds, which we do. Where do we do that? We do it here. So we're randomly creating those clouds, again, based on a random seed value, generating randomized numbers out of the randomizer. Now, if, in fact, there is a string, and if you notice, when we exit the level, I'm running that store clouds fast loop. So I pick each cloud one at a time in order, and I set the cloud string to this formula here, which is the X position plus a comma, then the Y position, and then the delimiter. I forget the name of the delimiter. Brain fart. But this delimiter here. And what happens is when we do that, and let's, for giggles, let's not get rid of the string, which we do here. I'm just going to delete that briefly. When we walk to the next screen, we're going to get this particular string here. So I want to copy that by not doing the right thing. Drop it here, and we get this string here. Let me redo that. And basically what this string does is it has 2, it's nested delimiters really. This is an element, this is an element, and this is an element, so forth and so on. Each element represents one of the clouds, and then inside the element we have 2 pieces of data that we want to pull out. So if there is a string there, because remember we just wrote the string before exiting the level, or rather restarting it, so now we have a string. It's going to set the main delimiter, which is the pipe, rather. See, I remembered. Pipe, right? And then it counts how many pieces of data I have between the pipes, and it should be 6. So set delimiter pipe, set source string to the cloud string, and then ask the delimiter, ask the string parser, how many elements do I actually have? And it returns 6. So then I start loop, reload clouds 6 times. So we go down here to our cloud area, and actually it's not there, sorry, it's up here. I should probably move down there. So then we start reload clouds, and it's going to do it 6 times. So on the first run, again, we set the delimiter again to the source string, and the reason why I need to do it again is because I'm going to be changing it each rotation. So even though I set it up here, I want to reset it in this loop, because you can see down here I change it again. And then of course set the source string to cloud string. So on the next fast loop reload clouds. I then set the source string to get me out of cloud string the first element based on the loop index, or the second element if it's the second loop, third loop, fourth loop, fifth loop, sixth loop. And remember, loop indexes are 0 based, so that's the reason why we have the +1, because we need to add to the loop index 1 to take the 0 and make it 1 for the string parser, which is 1 based to understand. So once I've done that, I've now, in the first loop, I've isolated the information down to this. So now the string stored in the string parser is now cut down to just this. Actually, you don't even see the pipe because it removes the pipe. So we get just that. If it was the second loop, then you would get just this data. So forth and so on. Now with that data, I set the string parser to the comma. I create my cloud off screen, which I kind of did. And then pulling those two elements based on the delimiter, I pull from my X and I pull from my Y. Now it's a string, so I also had to convert to value. And I do that the 6 times in a fast loop, and instantly appears, and that's how we go from randomly generated clouds here to the clouds repeating as we move along in the level. So that's initially, that's how I took it from what we saw yesterday, rather last Friday, to what we have today. Do you guys have any questions on it so far? So, okay, Jeff has suggested, what if we made it so that it could instantly, it just endlessly do that and scroll. Now that is possible, because it's Fusion, anything's possible. And I think I might try that over the next week, if anyone else seems to be interested in it. Because that's actually a cool idea. So what he's basically saying is using the same type of algorithm, instead of creating a single frame of the world and then another frame of the world, to consistently read from the random pool object and pop, as you're moving to the left or moving to the right, off screen the new elements and destroying the other elements that are out of the buffer zone. So we'd create off screen, our screens here, we'd create off screen some buffer zones where we would load in and destroy, or load in and destroy as the objects are created. The only downside to that, Jeff, is we would probably end up with some sort of limitation, because I'd have to reference those numbers. So I can't go back and reference previous numbers in the object, because it's only going to pop out the next number in the sequence. So we'd have to do what we did here in the planets, and we would have to, let's see here, I believe this is one of them, so let's make it visible. Nope. Let's figure out which object we're doing here. Build cells list. So list available cells. Lib index, nope. Subroutines, make planets. Reset. Add line. Okay, so generate planet type, right? So we have a planet type list here. We'll unhide that. And it generates this list of numbers. So what we probably have to do is generate a really big list of numbers so that we could reference them. And then we might want to take the length of the list of numbers, divide it in half and start in the middle so that you could go left and right. But we would need those list of numbers, because as we move forward, we'd want to move back. We'd have to re-reference that list of numbers again. And we can't do that when the numbers are being pulled in real time. I hope that answers your question, but I'm going to give it a try. Add 1 to randomizer every frame width. Well, right. Well, you're saying to make it endless. I believe what you're reading your comment. I believe you're trying to make it endless, which means that I'm not going to actually have a frame width that does it, because the frame would probably still be whatever the window is, and we would make the objects move. I thought that's what you originally meant. But you could do scrolling. I've already done that in my own work, so I'll pull it up again. I know you guys are bored of seeing it. and I need to get this game done. But it's a good illustration of, I think, maybe what he's talking about after reading it more in detail. Yeah, we'll ignore, and then it's down to here, and then I believe we got to turn, yeah, we'll turn that one off. So it's a smaller generated world, very similar to what we did in the other demonstration, but in this one you can actually scroll. But running into the same problem of trying to stream in the data, you'd have to have that really large list, and unless there's some way for me to reverse the pool count, because the way the randomizer object works is I give it a seed value, I ask for a number, and that gives me the next number in that sequence. And I can't say, give me the number you gave me 3 numbers ago, if that makes sense. So that's why in some cases I've done it in BitOdyssey, and I did it in the our Galaxy creation screen. I create a list so that I can reference those numbers back. So, you know, you can do the scrolling if this is what you meant. Let's blow up that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to shoot you guys. There you go. Ooh, it's snowing. All right. Does anyone else have any questions concerning the procedural generation? Jeff says it's his job to come up with the ideas. I have to make it work. That's true. It's absolutely true. Let's see, any questions over in YouTube? Circus Rama wants to know how this got into your recommended area. Well, Click Team probably hacked your YouTube account, and we sent you our pirate signal. So, sorry. And Agisa Steam asks, pretty sure they also came for the giveaway results. Concerning the giveaway, 2 things. Giveaway results have been transmitted to the winners. I'm waiting for all 5 winners to confirm receipt, because if one doesn't confirm receipt, then I got to redraw someone else. Once that does happen, then I'll announce them. But if you're one of the 5 winners and you're paying attention to your email, you already know that you won. So that's cool. And the second thing to tell you is we're going to do it again as part of that week of big things that happen next week leading up to the end of the year. So pay attention to clickteam.com for the next giveaway. It will be sometime next week. We really need help getting the social media ramped up as we move into getting Fusion 3 ready to release. Again, not releasing next week, not releasing the week after. We will have information by the end of the year concerning the state of Fusion 3 and how we're moving forward. But part of the process is, trying to reach out to as many folks as we can. So there's your information on the giveaway. All right, well, let's see what time it is. Does anyone have any suggestions on the procedural generation? If you do, leave me a note and I'll jump into it. But the other thing I wanted to show you is Anahita, a really cool game. If you've ever liked Out of This World or the original Prince of Persia, this game has a similar feel, and I thought we'd check it out. Click Team will be publishing it to Steam, I believe, on the 26th. It's going to hit Steam, iOS, and Android. Android and Steam definitely on the 26th. We're hoping it gets released on iOS on the 26th. However, Apple is about to hit their freeze on app submissions soon. We've submitted it, but I don't know if it's going to make the queue or not. So if it doesn't hit on the 26th for iOS, it will be shortly after. In any case, let's take a look at it. I do have it up on Steam. So we got the product page ready. If you're on Steam and you want to check out the game and be notified when it hits, just search Anahita, and then you can follow it and go from there. Really cool animations, and I think we'll just give it a play. So I'm actually going to have to go into here, and we'll launch it this way. So really cool Click Team made with Fusion logo. I'm being sarcastic. We need to come up with a better one. I thought about doing a contest. What do you guys think about that? But we need some good animated logos that people will be proud to include them in their game. And you're welcome, Aisa, for being posted on Fusion 3. So, I don't know about you, but the game seems a bit loud. So I'm going to try to turn it down a little bit. Okay. And then we'll blow it back up. And we'll go to game. And I'm going to delete my save. I was already far enough into the game. And we'll start from the beginning. There we go. So, first player that played it goes, what am I supposed to do here? Click this and went back to the menu. What you're supposed to do is click the box. And I got to figure out how to get rid of this, but okay. So here's our intro video. So that was the cool intro video, and then the game starts. Now it plays like a classic adventure game, like a King's Quest or a Space Quest. I guess that shows my age. Or some of the older LucasArts games. I'd say probably who's the biggest adventure game manufacturer now? It's the people that do like the Batman and the Game of Thrones. They're in San Francisco, I forget their name. But you know, you walk around and you try to explore. And he's got this square icon that kind of indicates to you that you're supposed to do something, and then you got the control key to do it. And then I'm going to walk around a little bit, show you what's going on. You get here, and the crow yells at you. Doesn't like you very much. And this guy's sleeping on the job. Lazy bones. You're lazy. How many jobs you got? So, you know, then you try to figure out what you do here. That's not doing anything. That doesn't do anything. And then, you know, what do you do? So, the other thing you have control over is the ability to jump. And so I spent some time jumping around. I'm like, well, nothing's happening. But like any good adventure game, you got to figure it out. And so I figured out this. Oh. And you got to do it again. And then drop down. And you drop the rope. Now I can grab the rope. And then a rope is no good at a well without a bucket. So, you know, that's... Obviously the crow isn't going to give me a bucket. But this is a bit odd, so... He's wearing a bucket for a hat. Figures. And you'll notice that the rope has now been attached to the bucket. So what do you do with a bucket that has rope? I don't know. Maybe attach it here? Now I've got some water. Telltale, that's right. Trident's correct. The studio that does a bunch of high-quality adventure games, the modern adventure game maker, Telltale, that's correct. So now the crow's still barking at me, but what do crows not like? I don't know why she drops the bucket. I would have kept it. Boing. I love the animations on this. So now that that's gone, we keep going. Picked up a feather. I spent all sorts of time trying to get into the house. There we go. I like the water effect here. It's simple, but it really pulls it off. Really does a good job giving that effect of water. And it's just an animation. So nothing happening there. I should probably post on the video when I post it to YouTube that there's spoilers for the game. Where'd this cow come from? Nothing. Sorry, guy. Okay, nothing going on here. Good. Looks like a bowl of some sort. Nope, nothing. Oh. Oh, wrong button. I was trying to jump. Oh. A white feather, but I have a black feather. Hmm. Bowl of water. Okay. No. Okay. So the milk turned the feather white. Okay. Well, he wanted a white feather, so let's see if he'll take it. If I can get the jump to work. There we go. Oh. If I had known milky feathers gave you that much power, I would have been using them much sooner. So now that's the second world. Let's walk around and see what we can do. That guy doesn't seem very friendly. Okay. Can't go any further. So that's not it. Oh. I'm trying to jump. The jump on this is so touchy. That might help if I hit the right button. There we go. Oh. Nope. We're gonna get it. Boom. Jumped. He's... Oh, I got a gun. Violence. Alright. Obviously not a good move. Aha! Okay, now here's a pro tip if you've never played the game before, which most of you have not. None of you probably have. I spent a long time trying to figure this out, so this is a pro tip. And then you come up here, and you can get a flower. Who doesn't like a good flower? Ooh. I really am killing her from high heights, aren't I? Okay. Can't go that way. Okay. Oops. Try. There we go. Falling off. Oh, it's not a gun. It's a water gun. All right. So we can shoot. Okay. May come in handy. Oh. Okay. That kind of looks like something. Of course, it'd be helpful if I didn't follow my face to get to it. What about the water gun? Uh-oh. Alright, what do we get? We got a elbow. Oh, I'm gonna... Oh, look, I made it. Nothing. Ah, so the planted flower attracts the bugs. No, nothing. Uh-oh. What? What is that? What? So I guess this is a Ghostbusters trap in her world. She makes it look so easy. Can't go that way. Whoa! Have any of you ever used a water gun on your pet? I have at least once. I'll admit. Well, there you go. That was level 2. There's 2 more levels, 2 more worlds. I'm not going to do any more because I don't want to give the whole game away. The game's only going to be $2 on Steam. It's going to be free with ads on iOS and Android. And he would really appreciate your support. He worked very hard in the game for a long time, and he's the only guy working on it out of Iran. And it's a pretty cool game. So hopefully you'll give it a shot. 26. We'll have social media posts about it. One last game maybe I'd like to show you, one that you're all familiar with, which will be coming out finally on mobile, is Get Wrecked. I figured out how to make Get Wrecked optimized for mobile. If you remember before, it worked great on PC, and the game had you try to keep the ball in the center of the circle, and the gap got wider and the circle went faster. Well, the problem I discovered, it wasn't the color shifting or the get RGB replacements or the using of the shading using RGB coefficient. None of that was slowing it down on mobile. What was slowing it down was having out of the circle, the circle object was cut into 2, and it was that big, so it was 2 objects that were 505 pixels high and what, 240, 250, 280 wide. And trying to scale those 2 and rotate them at the exact same time was what was taxing the game. And I said, well, you know, this is really disappointing because, you know, the game was supposed to be a mobile game for us. How do I fix that? So what I did is I kind of thought outside the circle, if you will. And instead of having 2 circle objects, I have 1. And the circle, the ball will always bounce on the circles. Now you'll see that I have these little objects here. Those are, yes, the ill-fated detectors. And if I were to turn them on real quick, visually, let's see if we get those detectors to show visually. The ball is already visible, so we'll declick that, visible at start. You'll see that the detectors are showing. So the purple one I must not have turned on, but it's sticking forward. So with those on, what I'm doing is I'm spinning this. This is the gap. So instead of the gap actually being a hole in the circle, I have another object which is obviously much smaller in size than the two different objects, circles overlapping each other. That was the trick. That's what I had to do. Now I had to figure out how to do the bouncing, whereas before it was if ball bounces the inside of the circle, then bounce. I had to change it to this kind of convoluted formula where if the forward bounce detector is overlapping the main circle, but it and the other two detectors are not overlapping the gap. I should probably rename that to gap. Then do the bouncing. And again, remember the bouncing is based on the angle the sphere is spinning. So if I'm spinning clockwise, then I get a direction that's based on a clockwise angle. So if I'm hitting on this angle, if I'm bouncing up and the thing is spinning this way, I'll get an angle that goes along with the spin. And the same thing with reverse or counterclockwise. Kind of gives you a little bit of sense of control. And that's what these flags do. They determine if that's happened. And then this flag off business is if the flag is, let's see, where is it? So it's this right here. I'm using one of these. Okay, flag off. Right. So the bottom flag, the bottom detector, the detector needs to be off because that's the initial state. So once the ball triggers a detection on the ring object, it turns that flag on. And the reason being is because we're using the overlap command. And that was the only way it would work. Collision didn't always trigger correctly. So the problem with the overlap command is it consistently triggers true as long as that's overlapping. So with the flag off and then setting it on, I make sure that it only triggers once. Now, how do I turn the flag back off? If that ball is no longer overlapping the main circle, we turn the flag back off. The result, and I did some tweaks here and there, the result is we have kind of a cool looking game, I think. So I did a couple more visual effects. The text fades in and out. We've got sector now. So each 10 hits on the circle increases the speed, and that raises your sector. And we also have the high score, which this high score is incorrect because I was testing. The best I've done is 113. But as you play, if I reach 200, then the high score will start ticking up along with the score in the ball. And you know, it's another way to engage the player UI-wise to say, hey, can you beat the score? And then you click to start. So I added this little effect of the ball hitting the wall, and I'm trying to make it look like it's a wave by overlapping the third ball, and I'm probably going to get rid of it. I rewrote the color routines to get brighter colors. There's a lot of dark colors, and then that losing method. So the score is 15, and you can see I've got a bunch of high scores, so I don't get the scoreboard. We posted, thanks to Windy Beard, if you're out there, thank you. He gave us a couple really cool examples. One of them was a keyboard. I noticed that whenever I was testing on my Android device, right here, and I used the built-in high score detection, it popped up the OS, the Android OS keyboard, but it also popped up the navigation bar, and I can't get the navigation bar to hide again, and that, you know, that looked really cheesy. So what I did is I used his code to write my own keyboard, which you as Reactor members can access for free. And let's simulate a high score. So we'll say score, set score 200, and then if I was to get a high score, I get this really cool keyboard where you can input your own stuff and return. So 34NM just got 200. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'm kind of happy with it so far. It's going to go on Android and iOS free with ads, and that will actually be a upcoming stream I'm almost done figuring it out. We're going to start with chart boost, and I'm going to walk everybody through how to do interstitial or video ads into their application. I think that's something a lot of folks struggle with. I know I am. You know, we'll go through the how to program it into your app, and also how to display them in how to set up the chart boost dialog on the front end through the web. So that'd be kind of cool. Next week's stream will also be Firefly. We're going to do some Firefly work. So if you want to see what you can do in 3D in Fusion, I'll dabble that in a little bit. But that's pretty much all I've got for today. Anybody have any questions? Let's see if there's any questions or comments. Or you thought guns were dangerous, you should see Kisaguri jump around. That's true. That's true. I am scary. I don't see any more questions yet. So, okay. We can play a little more Get Wrecked while I'm waiting to see if there are any questions. It's sick, but I really like this game. It kind of gives me the trashy attempt at being a super hexagon, but I've had a lot of fun playing it. Let's try to go for a good score. So you see that it's rotating clockwise, and each bounce kind of follows along with the clockwise rotation. And the reason why that's actually important is because as the game gets faster, I can quickly change the direction of the ball. So it gives you a sense of control. Oh boy. Oh no! I did. Now the good news is I've cheated and I left the score in. So let's change that. In fact, let's start fresh. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this, and we're going to go to the high score table. We're going to reset, and we're going to run it.
You got wrecked.
No high scores. And then we're going to find our INI. And let's see, right there, we'll say start a frame. We'll just remove this, and we'll say set to 0. We're kind of cheating a little bit here. Run it.
You got wrecked.
Good. Close it out. And remove the reset, and then we're good to go. Let's see if there's any questions. Well, Zergana, I see that you're struggling with Firefly. I'm going to do basics next week. So, you know, getting a model to appear, rotate around the model, get the model to move, to scale, to build a camera so that you can see and walk around the model. Very basic stuff, which I hope will get you started. Try to quit beating up our users. All right, let's go for that high score. So you can see that because there is no high score, my score and the high score are synced. Oh, that's close. Oh. I did. I got wrecked. Let's try again. Okay, we're already beating our score. Oh, too soon, 16. Man. There you go. Maybe that would be the next good click jam after Fusion Awards. Maybe we do one where the design goal is to make a very frustrating puzzle game. Oh no, my mouse didn't work. My mouse didn't work. I'll stop when I hit 50. And make it to sector 5. Or is it 6? I guess it's sector 6. The circle's getting fast now. Points. 48. Perry says puzzle game, yay me. Alright, let's see if there's any questions from YouTube. No. No questions here. One more round, maybe? One more round. Go for that 50. Go for that 50. Another feature that I added that a lot of people aren't aware of, including me when I'm playing it, is the bars on the side of the circle deplete with every click. Or if you die, like I just did, because I just got wrecked. But you can also, and each bounce on the wall replenishes it. But you can, if you choose, you can hold the circle with the hold touch, but it drains rapidly. So if we let it drain all the way, then I get wrecked. So, you know, the idea is how much control and how much kind of strategy can you put in something very simple, which was, you know, my thinking when we started it. It plays really good on mobile. I get higher scores on mobile because just the platform and the way we designed it just makes more sense on mobile. It's more intuitive. Having the screen to touch instead of the mouse. Almost bought the farm there. Ooh. Let's put something in here that matches how I'm feeling. Okay. One more time. That's not a good color combination. So I probably need to trim the color routine even more, because you can barely see. Well, luckily we only have to make it to 10. There you go, that's better. Oh, save just in the nick of time. Come on. There's 50. $60. Woo! Come on, give me 100. Oh, 98. All right, I'll take it. I'll take it. All right, so there you go. Yeah, the random color changes are pretty cool, Zarkoner. If you haven't if you're wondering how I did it, it's pretty much the same source. If you are a Reactor member, all you have to do is go download the source. You can get the source off of ClickStore as a Reactor member, $15 or higher. Go here. And this is one of the always available, so you can always download the source. So it includes the game and the source. $2.99 for the rest of you. But the color changing works like this. I'm, for the most part, using, let's look at the circle. For the most part, I'm using the set RGB coefficient, which works across all three platforms. And then I'm doing some math here, so, well, counting really. First thing I do is I change the color. So we have new back, new R, new back R, new back G, new back B. So 3 values for RGB, red, green, blue. And each one of these is a different little formula that provides different colors, right? And then here we set the new R, the new G, the new B, 254 minus that background. That gives us the background color. So these two different values are then manipulated here, where I subtract or add if the color is higher or lower from that value. And then we do the same thing here, and then we set the different values here on an always event. And the background works pretty much similar, where we have the background color there, but then we're subtracting or adding based on the formula. So that's how we do the shifting. Okay, how does the jam work? Good question. So the cool thing is itch.io does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. You basically join the jam. You have, during the jam period, which will be right here, this time we've got a long time because we want some really good entries. You build a game based on what the released theme will be, which will appear right here. And then you got to submit it. And to submit, I can't really show you here. Maybe if let's do this. Let's look at game jams. Actually, we need to go, where is just all the game jams? Here you go, game jams. Jams I've joined. Let's see what's active right now. This is active. So I could join the jam, right? And then right here you see the button now says submit your project. So then, you know, it asks me which of my projects I've created an item for. So what you do is you have to make a new upload new project. That's right there. So you upload new project. Once you've uploaded the new project, then you go to submit your project, and you pick which project it is, and then you upload a game file. And then at the end of the jam, everyone gets to vote on your game, and whoever gets the highest votes wins. Hopefully that answers the question. I need to see if I can unsubscribe from that jam now. Probably not. Oh, leave jam. Peace out, jam. I'm out. So I hope that answers your question. Real easy to do. Itch is a really cool place. I've met the guys at GDC. Great guys. And you get really lots of cool, really interesting indie games. And occasionally there's Fusion-made games. Let's see if it's up here anymore. I don't see it. It was up here for me earlier today. But there's actually quite a few Fusion-made games. I'll go to our profile. And you go all the way to the bottom. These are all published by ClickTeam, but then there's all these. These are a bunch of games made in Fusion that are on itch already. Looking for more. And then these are some of the ClickJam entries. So yeah, pretty cool. Hope that answers your question, Jeff. Let's see if the Reactor has any questions on YouTube. No. And then, can you still add the tag? Yeah, of course you can. Use I want to create tag as much as you can, please. Anything to help. Really need to push those two tags, the pound I want to create and pound made with Fusion. Those are our two tags that we really try to push. So any help you can do there is greatly appreciated. All right, guys. Well, I want to wrap it up today. I'll have this video posted soon, and appreciate you watching. I will make another post on our Reactor page. Please let me know what you want me to do next in upcoming streams. Next week will most likely be mostly Firefly, and hopefully we get to Chart Boost. I hope those are good ones that you want to see. If not, let me know in the thread I'll create. And keep on clicking, guys. I really appreciate it. And that's it for me today. I'll stick around for a little while longer to answer any questions. Thanks for watching.